Welcome back. Questions of national security at Canada's top infectious disease lab. The opposition say the Liberals are trying to cover up an incident where two scientists were fired. They were escorted out of Winnipeg's National Microbiology Laboratory in 2019 over what the Public Health Agency described as relating to possible breaches in security protocols. Last week, all opposition parties joined forces to pass a motion declaring the Public Health Agency of Canada in contempt of Parliament for refusing to provide documents about the firing of the scientists. Joining us to talk about this now is Global News investigative journalist and author of Willful Blindness: How a Network of Narcos, Tycoons, and Chinese Communist Party Agents Infiltrated the West. Sam Cooper joins us now. Sam, thanks so much for joining us. I think this story is catching a lot of people's attention. They're wondering what it's all about. What do we know about the allegations of these two scientists who were dismissed from the lab under mysterious circumstances and have kind of disappeared? Were they spies?
We know that Dr. Q has been working on dangerous pathogens in the Winnipeg lab since about 2006. We know she's a highly decorated scientist. Her husband worked with her in the lab as well. And the problem, according to CSIS, is that students of hers from China are very connected to China's military. So we know that CSIS had warned Canada's government Dr. Q and her students should not be working in this high security lab. There are concerns, CSIS automatically is concerned about People's Liberation Army connections to researchers in Canada. So these were flagged and the government did not respond to that warning. The work continued, and as your viewers know, there was dangerous pathogens sent to the Wuhan lab in 2019. Other viral samples were sent to China over the years. Dr. Q maintained a high degree of connectivity to her People's Liberation Army colleagues, that is, high-level scientists we know from open source records that are involved in studying bioweapons in China, were involved in co-research with Dr. Q. So when we put all this together with the redacted documents, they talk about viral samples that have been adapted to mice and guinea pigs in Canadian labs being sent to Wuhan. It raises a lot of concerns that there could be espionage-like activity, and there could be concerns that scientists in China working on dangerous activities such as gain of function may have been working in some way with Canadian scientists.
Obviously, that is pretty astounding. It's pretty concerning. I know the conversation in the United States about where COVID-19 came from is evolving, and under the Biden presidency, it's not seen as Trump coming up with this bellicose rhetoric about it possibly being a lab accident. President Biden is saying this. It's a theory that is being seriously looked at now. What is the perception in Washington and in our allies, because I know you talk to a lot of allied intelligence agencies and spies, about what happened in Canada and what happened in Winnipeg in particular?
I've had conversations recently where there's a growing level of interest in Washington, especially with the lab leak hypothesis. It is becoming a more plausible theory within the United States intelligence community. Of course, President Biden asked his intelligence agents to study this theory. And I've been having conversations where sources say that, you know, if more evidence is brought out, there could be a commission of inquiry in the United States into a potential lab accident in Wuhan. And so, of course, Washington is starting to be interested in these allegations in the Winnipeg lab. In the worst case, if Canadian scientists were working on gain-of-function research in some ways, co-researching with Chinese scientists, it just raises the level of concern that they could have been involved not in the coronavirus at all, but in dangerous research that occurred in China.
When you talk to your sources, are they concerned about the release of these documents in Parliament? Because on the one hand, you have parliamentarians saying, we need to see this, we need to know what happened. But we're also hearing from a lot of folks who work in national security, okay, maybe one committee with security clearance needs to see them, but the mass release of these documents could lead to other national security infractions. What are you hearing about that from your sources?
There's two arguments, and you pointed to one, that this new National Security Committee has really, it's had value in that it is showing the Canadian public, or those that want to read their reports, that Canadian intelligence does have some big concerns around countries such as Russia and China and their activity in Canada. On the other hand, what the critics who would come from the Conservative Party side are saying, could this committee be used as a blockade to these important documents? Is the government trying to hide something? And furthermore, even if the committee is doing great work around studying interference, is the Trudeau government doing anything about these recommendations to follow countries such as Australia and the United States in taking a stronger stand against interference from potential hostile state
Sam,
activity?
How deep is that interference? I know you just wrote a book on it. We're not just concerned about this one lab where we don't know exactly what happened, but how deep is the Chinese government's penetration of major Canadian institutions?
There's a concern within CSIS and RCMP Criminal Intelligence that it's not just the Winnipeg lab. There are concerns around the CanSino vaccine collaboration, deep concerns around political influence activities at all levels of Canadian government, from municipal city halls to school boards up to Parliament Hill. So I can confidently say in the Five Eyes intelligence community, there's a growing eye upon Canada and the concern about whether Canada is strong enough against interference.
Sam, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate it, and I'm sure we'll be back to talk more about this soon.
Thank you.
And that's it for this edition of the West Block. Thanks for joining us.